Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. The Cameraman, written by Featherfall. When I was first told of the posting, I thought that they were mad. I still think that they were mad. They were in an active war zone. In one of the bloodiest conflicts of the last 1,000 years. And they wanted to stick a civilian in our unit. He waved away the question before it could be asked. Yes, I know he'd gone through boot camp, but look at it from my perspective. I'd had 14 years of combat experience, and here was some fresh-faced recruit from some race that nobody had ever heard of, and they wouldn't even be holding a gun. That was absurd. Obviously, the first thing we did was try and look them up. Aside from their race's join date and some nonsense conspiracy theories, all we had was they were probably built for running. We had nothing about their military traditions, nothing about their tactics or philosophies, nothing about their physical capabilities, nothing but that one fact, which of course did very little to assuage fears about the placement. Most of us thought that we were being given a coward. They weren't even going to fight, hailing from a race that was known for their ability to run. Evidently, they were a flight risk, that they were weak, that they were in a non-combatant role because they were afraid, and that they had no place in a conflict at large, that they would get in the way. First impressions, actually better than expected, but not by much. They spent most of the first meeting cracking jokes about planets' low gravity, and we were, maybe, not relieved at how small they were, but we were probably all thinking something like, at least they'll be easier to keep out of the way. It wasn't until we'd actually met up that they'd bothered to tell us why he was here. That the brass was looking to drum up support and wanted some cool visuals to show the masses. A picture of troops here, a video of explosions, or 3 there, and so on. Our new pal was just the guy they wanted to take them. We spent a lot of time heading between drills in those first few days. But then, there wasn't much excitement at all in our area, for that month, anyways. Even when things started heating up, he did a good job of staying out of the way, disappearing during the skirmishes and then materializing sometime after the fight, with another couple of rolls safely in his bag. He did his job, we did ours, and I honestly didn't take much notice of him for just about the entire deployment. The General grinned. But for some reason, I get the feeling that that's not the part of the story that you're interested in. He took a moment to get comfortable, knowing that I wasn't about to leave, then leaned forwards and lowered his voice. Just try and picture the scene. The light is starting to fade, and our original 5, there's 3 down, dead on first impact. We're half-starved, and we have no orders. Our squad's leader was more or less obliterated in the hit, and the rest of our army is drawn back. I'm missing a leg and quite probably going to bleed to death in the crater besides our fallen comrades. The main body of the enemy's force is between us and our evac, which is leaving in less than half an hour. We have no reinforcements. The enemy is still actively shooting at us and, somehow, the only man in our squad still actually standing was our non-combat photographer. And this dumb son of a bitch just looks me right in the eyes and says, "Don't worry, I was on the track team." The General threw his hands up. That was it. That was all he told me. I, of course, had no idea what track is or why I shouldn't be worried. When he slings me over his shoulder and starts running at the enemy lines, they're still shooting at us, mind. Camera in hand, bag over one shoulder, and my screaming 80-pound ass slung over the other. And here he is, running faster than I'd ever seen anyone in their life run. Past bunkers, past encampments, past vehicles, emplacement weaponry, lines and lines of enemy soldiers. The low light was helping. But I honestly had no idea how none of them hit us, just from the sheer volume of rounds they sent our way. He was doing a good job of keeping us in some sort of cover as we moved, but there was only so many ditches that we could run through, so many walls or trees that we could hide behind, so many hills that we could keep between us and them. It wasn't all bad as that first dash. Once we made it through their battle line, there was enough chaos to at least reduce the amount of shots being sent our way. But it wasn't exactly a walk in the park either. I remember on one occasion he ran past a building and found 2 soldiers in our path on the other side, waiting. I thought that we were screwed, that our luck had run out. But the crazy bastard that just ran right at them stepped up onto a sandbag and jumped over these armed-to-the-teeth 10-foot behemoths. I still wonder what they must have been thinking at that moment, as a scrawny little biped carrying a heavy satchel and a screaming griznai, almost twice his size, sailed over their heads in the middle of their encampment. He shook his head. We just about made it to the airback, through 8 miles of enemy-controlled territory, before they managed to get that first hit in. Bag hit the floor, and we went down. Hard. Luckily for us, we'd been running towards another crater, and that kept us out of sight for a little as we'd rolled down to the bottom. I tried to spring to my feet before remembering I only had one, and by the time I'd struggled into a vaguely sitting position, he'd already picked up the camera again. It was probably about when he moved to get a good shot of his now severed arm that I realized that he'd been filming the whole time. That he'd been taping our mad dash through the countryside. I remember his face too, as he looked through the little window at that hunk of meat swimming in crimson. How his whole demeanor had changed as he realized what it would mean for our trip. I almost thought that he'd picked the camera. I don't even think that I'd have blamed him, but the damage made that decision a little easier. In the excitement, we hadn't noticed that the round wasn't a clean hit. It had smashed its way through 2 walls of his camera after punching a hole through its body. And the machine's innards were now open to the world. Most of the film was probably ruined the instant the round hit, but he threw it under his coat in the foolish hope that at least some of it was salvageable. Knowing he wouldn't be able to take the bag with us anymore, he'd grabbed all the digital chips and a couple of the smaller rolls of film. But that bag had been filled to the brim, and most of it wasn't going to be joining us. Almost as an afterthought, he pulled a knife out from his boot and cut the strap off the camera before sealing the bag again. I guess he realized that he didn't need it anymore if he was leaving the bag behind. Only after he'd done all of that did he bother to tie off the gaping hole where his arm should be. Things changed after that point. Before, I didn't think that he'd actually been taking it very seriously. Despite watching our comrades die, he'd still had the foolhardy, won't-happen-to-me mentality that your kind is well known for. The fact that we'd made it this far as we had was probably encouraging in his perspective, but I think seeing his baby smashed to pieces had been something of a wake-up call that he could no longer ignore. We set out again. But he'd lost the carefree attitude that he'd had before. There were no more straight dashes. Now we weaved in and out of cover as he ran. Our center of gravity was lowered too. Despite his smaller stature, I'd never had to worry about the ground during the first leg of our journey. Now, I was in constant fear of it. By this point, we were well past the half hour. So imagine my surprise when we arrived, the both of us drenched in one of my comrades' sweat, to see the bird still sitting there. Eyes above had been keeping tabs on us from the start of the fight, and they'd held their ride back on the off chance that this merry chase wasn't a failure. They were after propaganda after all, and this story was perfect. A dash of incompetence on the enemy's part, a sprinkling of courage, and a liberal helping of praise for our newest ally. Thus, it was some no-name non-combatant instead of an honor guard doing the rescue against all odds on a hostile planet. It was exactly what they were after, and then some. Now, my understanding is that by your own standards, simply bringing an ally back through enemy fire is deserving enough of a Medal of Honor. Galactic standards are a little stricter, requiring that the feat also do something detrimental to the enemy. By that standard, this doesn't qualify. No, the reason he got the medal was because he went back for his bag. End of story. The algorithm reckons you should be watching this video next, and I recommend that you should be always watching my video. So, click with energy! And yes, clicking that does help the channel. Thank you very much. I'd just like to give a quick thanks to the T5 channel members and patrons: Alithia, Parky, Fudic Yol, Meridian117, Cam Maxwell, Casper Arnholtz, Angry Marine, Lord Azrakal, and White Van 420.